All right, peeps, we are back with another dating relationship Q&A. Rolling. Guys, I apologize. I completely forgot that we had one on Monday. I know I said that, I tweeted it out, and then it was like early the next day, the morning, I was checking DMs. I'm like, well, I'm gonna get all these questions for the periscope. I just completely forgot about it. So not gonna make some elaborate excuse. Just gonna take responsibility for it. But we got it today. We got a bunch of questions, so we're gonna try to plow through this stuff. Of course, we got to start off with the wine. We got to start off with the wine. Now, look, I want to move on. I want to move on to the big areas of Italy, but I want to finish checking all the boxes here. Okay, and there was a couple areas. We did a little bit more in Alto Adige because there were some grapes that I skipped that I hadn't found before. I wanted to go back to Valpolicella because, okay, we didn't have the proper comparisons. So we had a Valpolicella Ripasso against an Amarone, which is interesting, but not surprisingly the difference. And we had a Valpolicella Ripasso against an IGT Verona. Now, I thought that was going to be like a Valpolicella, and it was not. Did not use Corvina grape. It used it used other grapes and everything, probably Merlot. So when I saw that I was able to get another most controlled comparison here, I wanted to do it. All right, I want to see what really is the difference, because this is important, because this has become such a popular basic wine from Valpolicella, and they're trying to say it's so much better than this. Like, Amarone is a completely different thing. So just a little quick reminder, Valpolicella Ripasso is Valpolicella that has been run through the used grapes of Amarone. Remember, Amarone is very, very rich. The grapes have been dried out. Okay, so the grapes are very, very rich, very, very intense flavor, high alcohol content. Okay, so let's check it out. And guys, by the way, how's the connection? Because I keep getting these connection signs, and I don't know if it's bullshit or not. I often get it in here, but it doesn't really seem to normally affect the telesponding. Yeah, of course, this is what this is. It's a Q&A. Great. This Valpolicella is awesome. It's super simple, but it's just nice and juicy. This is like probably one of the ideal table wines you could have, and I love the color. It's sort of like this, I don't know. It's like a glowing red. I love that color when I see a red wine like that. Really, yeah. I'm always using these headphones. I never made the jump over. All right, let's try the Ripasso. Ooh, so okay, look. So this is actually really, you're getting some like raisiny notes, right? Getting some raisiny notes. Some of that little cooked candied fruit smell that you would get from an Amarone. And it really does accent it nicely. It really does accent it nicely. Wow, this is okay, guys. I'm a big fan of these brands. These are really great. Antica Corte. This is a really nice Valpolicella, really nice Valpolicella Ripasso. Clear differences between them. And I would rate the Ripasso higher, but I mean the basic Valpolicella is great, and this is all, I think this was all around like $15 or $15. Wasn't too expensive either. What is like a spicy wine? What do you mean by spicy? You mean spicy in terms of how it makes you feel, or do you mean like actually a spiced wine? Because I don't usually have that. I mean, mulled wine, sure, I could have a mulled wine, but to be honest, I prefer this stuff. Prefer it dry and cool. All right, we got a lot of questions, and I want to try to get through them all. So I'm gonna start rolling with this stuff. Yeah, Malbec can be spicy. Yeah, some wines have a lot of pepper to them. Malbec can do that. Definitely get that in Cabernets. Usually wines that have tannins. Higher tannins tend to have higher spiciness. Let me see it. Wine off the top of my head that has cinnamon. I've had wines that have that as like a little bit of a flavor, but usually you're gonna get that with older wines. And to be honest, cloves I've gotten more often. Cloves is, and honestly, you could get that from a wine like Amarone. One of the wine that's from the same region as these. Like an Amarone could give you that. It gives you just a really, really, like cherry pie with baked spices. Baking spices is usually how they describe it. I have not tried English wine, and English wine in general is shit. However, 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 well, I'm sorry for the language then, but however, English sparkling wine, English champagne is actually very good. It's actually very good. And I think I've only had it once before. Just to give you guys a little bit of a background here, maybe at some point we'll do it. There is a plain that extends in the Champagne region all the way to around Rennes, and it goes all the way up across the English Channel to the cliffs of Dover and in through southeastern England. Okay, and this is all calcaire, it's all chalk. You remember in maybe World War One, a really authentic World War One movie is going to show in major sections of the line. I mean, you always talk about the mud, and that's true. That's true in certain sections of the front, like maybe closer to, Verdun area. But when you went further north, right, to the northeastern part of the front, that was going all through chalk. And so I think, what was it, 1917, that movie that came out the other year, that was really good at showing actually that the soil they were in, it's like was really difficult to dig trenches into. It's all chalk. And that chalk is what makes champagne so good. The best soil type for wine. Obviously, there are other ones that do a good job. I think slate's pretty good. Volcanic can be very interesting. Granite has a really, popular. Granite can be very popular, and in certain areas, you actually might want sand because it's better for drainage. But chalk is amazing. I'll tell you real quickly why. This is just a good time to mention this. I know some of you guys like the wine talk. This is chalk is really, really good as a soil, calcareous soil as they call it, because first off, it has all sorts of minerality, which is really good for the vine, really good for the flavor of the grape. Now, there can be too much, and that can actually hurt the vine. But generally speaking, it's very good for the wine. But here's the very big thing. Chalky soil absorbs water. And this is important because if you are in certain parts of the world, and this is not the case for Champagne, but if you're in certain parts of the world, it's going to rain a lot during one part of the year, right? And you're going to want, and then through the summer, it's going to be hot, like for instance, in the Mediterranean. So it gets very, very hot. People are taking pictures of me. This is more of media articles. Is that what's going on? So it's like a sponge. And basically, throughout later sections of the year, they're going to have all this water from the rainy season that the vines, when you have really old vines, they dig deep, that they're able to get access to all that water. So it's really, really good stuff. Now, it's also it creates really good flavor. It creates a very good flavor profile. And people keep taking pictures of me. This is like weird. It's weird stuff. And so what's happened is that in southeastern England, Champagne is a marginal area. And I don't know if you guys know this about Champagne, and we'll talk more about it when we get into Champagne. But Champagne is, it historically never got warm enough to actually produce wine. It only produced sparkling wine. Okay? People are just trolling me now. Sparkling wine. Only was good enough to produce sparkling wine. And the reason it was important to produce sparkling wine is because you could produce sparkling wine off of grapes that had not fully matured. So Champagne, the grapes wouldn't mature. Burgundy, just a little to the south, would barely mature. Okay? So they made sparkling wine because the regular drinking wine throughout the entire last 1,000 years, or since the medieval warm period at least, has not been haven't been able to produce still wine from the area. It just, the grapes wouldn't ripen. It would have very low alcohol content and would be very tart. In fact, champagne has sugar added to it. There's the dosage, and that's important not only for it's important to sort of to give the effervescence, etc. All right, so I'm a Gemini. Okay, but so this is important for the English wine because as things have gotten a little bit warmer in the last couple of years, they've been able to start, and also of course with more refined, and also because because of more refined winemaking techniques, more technical winemaking skills, southeastern England has been able to produce basically champagne, and they have the same soil as champagne. So so basically, that's how it's been able to happen, right? That's how it's been able to happen. You guys can talk about them, but this is a dating relationship, Q&A. I don't, and to be honest, guys, I don't have anything to say about them right now. I mean, I don't know. I haven't watched their stuff. I haven't really seen too much going on. It's all speculation at this point. So but yeah, so anyway, basically the moral of the story, the TLDR, is that English sparkling wine is basically champagne, or it has the potential to be like champagne, and it's done quite well in blind tasting, basically. So that's the moral of the story. All right, so let's get into this periscope here. Let's see. Also, just want to say something real quick here. Just this real quick question. Rule 0 says no long-term relationships until 35 and use 20s to build and spin plates. Thoughts? I mean, I've talked about this stuff before. I think it's incredibly stupid blanket advice because it's not, guys are going to feel differently. Guys are going to have different objectives. So, but the bigger point here is that to throw that out as an ironclad rule. Okay, not only is it extremely ahistorical, but it's just an avoidance pattern. I mean, the same people who say this stuff don't actually ever commit. So they'll keep just pushing back the date. They're like, no, my value keeps going up. My value keeps going up. And then, of course, that's not the reality of it. So, this is not something that I would personally not recommend this. Now, I would say that I don't think it's like, I don't think any sort of action based on this sort of, here's the rules that you have to follow as a man when it comes to dating. I don't believe any of that stuff is. I think we go through seasons of our life, and getting into a serious relationship when you're younger is important to learn. And that doesn't mean you have to marry the girl, but it's important to learn. So the fact that stuff isn't really brought into the equation, I mean, you're not going to get the same level of growth if you're only dating a girl, spinning a plate for every 3 months. And frankly, guys, it gets fucking boring. I mean, maybe not every guy, but spinning plates gets boring. You do the same thing over and over and over again to bring a girl into the circle. She's attractive. She's there for a couple months. She wants to leave. It gets exhausting. It gets exhausting to feel, in some cases you feel like you hurt the girls, and you're kind of going through the same thing over and over again. So I don't really think any of these ironclad rules are based on anything besides for self-rationalizing. You should go through periods of dating. You should go through periods of relationships. And, I think that eventually when you find somebody, never be afraid to leave what you're doing. That's the big lesson here. Never be afraid to stop something that you're doing. So if you're dating, don't be afraid to get into a relationship. If you're in a bad relationship, don't be afraid to leave it and date again. That's the important, lesson as far as I'm concerned. So yeah. All right. So let's see here. So this is a follow-up. Maybe you guys remember some of this stuff. I'm in a long-distance relationship with a girl from another state here in Brazil. It's a 3-hour flight. I went to her city last week and spent 6 days with her. We went to the beach, and our connection and chemistry got way bigger than expected. Before I went there, I was just expecting to have a good time and nice sex, but now I really got into her in a way I could never have thought about. We are setting plans to travel next week to the south of the country together, and she will also come to my city afterwards. I always remembered what you told me in the last Periscope, that long distance relationships might work, but the distance got to end. How long do you think it would be? Also, I must tell you from the bottom of my heart that your story with your wife was a great inspiration to me, since my situation with this girl is pretty similar. I would love if you could expand on that too, my friend. And thank you for everything you do and for being one of the most brave men alive. Well, that's kind to say. Um, so, in terms of, like, I'm gonna say this for the guy who submitted this question. You're already on the right track. Okay, so I'm not going to tell you anything that you actually need to know. What you need to know is just simply to follow your heart at this point. You guys are falling deeper for each other. You guys are both making it work to spend more time with each other. You guys are now going on trips together. Sounds like at this point they're seeing each other every 2 to 4 weeks. So how long should that go on for? I think that you guys are gonna know, especially after this coming month. You're gonna know where you wanna take it. Um, there are different timelines that people have based on their own circumstances, based on their own connection between them and the girl. In the case of my wife and I, we had it was one of those things that when we were simply the distance was much greater than you guys, and at the beginning we also have the immigration stuff. You guys live in the same country. It's way different. It's way different to be like, okay, I live in New York, you live in California, and we see each other. Because you can always make a decision, especially now with remote working for the most part, you can make a decision to move and to bounce. There's a lot bigger stuff we had to deal with immigration, all these other things that were on the horizon. Once we made the decision to make it happen, that took about 8 months for us, but we took it very slow, and there was even a period in between where we didn't really talk for about 2 months. So things maybe kind of ended. So I would just say, for you in your situation, follow your heart. Both of you. It's obvious that you guys are falling for each other, and you will. As a man, once you're kind of reading her signs and reading her investment, you guys can talk about it. She doesn't necessarily have to come to where you are, but you pick a new city that the two of you guys can both go to. It really just depends on your own work situations as well. I would not try to arrange your life around her, but it's because that will flip the framing dynamic. But yeah, you guys are going in a good direction. So don't overthink it, is what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to emphasize that for you. Don't overthink it. You're doing great. So but I guess sooner than later, right? It should end sooner than later, the distance. All right. So there's this fitness instructor of a class I go to once a week I find attractive and would like to ask her out. How would I go about it, since she's my coach, and would not want to make things weird if I told her I like her? Thanks, man. Okay. Well, the big thing here is that I would like to hear more about the dynamic between the two of you, right? This is important. What's the dynamic between the two of you? Because if the dynamic between the two of you is really platonic, and you're just like, man, I find her hot, you're not going to want to go up, and you're not going to just, tell her, right? There's always a little bit of a muddied water here with the classes. I would spend more time, though, if you haven't been doing this already, talking to her after class, kind of flirting with her, seeing what the energy between the two of you is, right? And then you could move things forward. Then you could go and ask if that's how it's being presented. But you want to ease your way in, and you want to try to make a separation between the two of you as platonic versus not platonic. And to be honest, I don't know what the structure of these classes are, but you being her student, very often these things only work. Okay, there's like a fantasy thing here that you could play off of, but very often these things only work if you're now moving out of it. So maybe maybe what happens is that you have, I don't know how many classes you have. I don't know if it's pay as each class, but maybe you want to get into something else. Maybe you want to get into to martial arts, and you tell her that you're going to be leaving the class, but then you get her number. Um, but the point is you need to find a way to separate yourself from simply being a client, because that business relationship complicates the role that you guys would have romantically. So set the foundation for it, set the flirtation, and you can pay attention. If she pays more attention to you, if she starts to engage with you more, if she's sort of asking more things about you, then you're getting the signals, and then you can make a move, right? You can make a move. But if you're doing that stuff and she's not really reciprocating, you probably don't have much of a window, and your main move is going to be something like, you're not going to want to just stay in there as a client, because the more time that you have exposure and she's not really, you have a shorter window to make this impression, is what I'm trying to emphasize. You have to make the impression relatively early on, or you have to bring her into a circle where you can make the impression in a different way. But you can't just be at her class and do the same thing over and over and over again, because she's going to rule you out romantically. So, obviously you can ask her, but if you do it, you also be ready to leave the class anyway. So I would probably be moving the transition out of it, because let's just say you do start to date her, then being in her class is going to be weird. It's going to be a weird dynamic. Got to complicate her business too. You don't want to do that to her. What is a deciding factor for men on a first date, whether they want to pursue something serious? Well, okay, aside from the fact that they're attracted to the girl, right? Obviously that has to happen. I would say that, it needs to feel natural between the two of you. And so a really great way for a girl to make a guy feel comfortable with her is to, be willing to, girl game is really valuable. So being able to sort of joke with him, having a sense of humor, being able to joke with him, laughing at the things he says, right? That works really well on guys. If you're laughing, if you're kind of giving the doe eyes to the guy when he's telling stories, or when he's making jokes, then he's gonna feel very validated by you, and he's probably gonna want to go on another date. I don't know if it's a deciding factor in terms of marriage material. That kind of stuff happens just from, you have to feel it very viscerally, right? Okay, next question. Can two people with a codependent relationship past have a functional relationship after a period of time away from each other? To clarify, both are codependents and adult children of alcoholics. Would love to hear anything related to codependency and adult children of alcoholics in relationships. Thank you for doing this, Pat. Well, as I take a swig of wine here, right? No, in all honesty, though, people with a codependent relationship past can, of course, change. Of course, they can change. There's no doubt about that. Now, we have to say this as well, okay? That if you have this sort of background, right? If you have this kind of background, you need to, and let's say you got into a relationship with each other. I'm presuming that that's the case, and that because of their past patterns, attachment patterns, because of the alcoholic parents, that they created a really crappy, immature relationship. Space is really important here. Now, I don't think usually when I know of so few cases where people broke up and then within a short period of time got back together with their ex, that the situation worked. I mean, such a small number that it's almost a guaranteed failure. Now, there are some situations where people dated and then they literally they gave up the relationship. But you have to understand, this is important. They broke up and they accepted it was over. And then they went and they lived their life and they had experiences, and then fate brought them back together again. And that relationship has worked. Now I have heard stories like that, right? I have heard stories like that. And the difference is that you're not really able to grow past the pattern in the relationship until you've detached from the pattern in the relationship. And so if you're still drawn to the person you feel like you need to be with them, then you haven't worked out the pattern. And if it was so bad that you broke up, then you're probably going to break up again. So I recommend, I don't know the specifics, but I recommend to take a step back, right? Take a step back, move on with your life. And, and I mean, if they were, there's always specifics, specific things here. Because obviously people in a codependent relationship can move it to a secure position. But if you've already gotten to the point where you've broken up, unless you guys have really gotten so clear on why you broke up and so determined on both ends to deal with your own crap that brought it to happen, I would just say move on from it. But if you do have that level of ownership, I guess you could give it a shot. I do think that there's value to giving things a shot, because even if there's a low probability of them working, it helps you to work through the problems by having that awareness and that acknowledgement. So, I tell it to clients all the time. They date a girl who's no good. It's like, that's okay. You're still going to learn from it. Go ahead and do it. Go ahead and experience it. Once the pain hits a certain point, you have to emotionally work through the pattern. I understand that. So let's try to move through it as fast as possible. I'm not going to judge you for doing a very, very human thing. Where two people do laugh and get along, is there any way to separate a player versus a serious guy? The players always work on flattery, right? I mean, they'll tease maybe, but if the girl finds herself in a position of chasing, that's usually or how do I put this? Whenever the guy is whenever somebody is telling you exactly what you want to hear, you're getting played. That's the moral of the story, right? So if a guy is telling a girl exactly what she wants to hear, exactly what she needs to hear to be attracted, then that's the stuff, All right, next question. How would you answer your 12-year-old son when he asks, what is dating? Ooh, get me prepared for this stuff down the road. What is dating? Well, I would say that I would tell the kid that dating is when two people find out, are trying to figure out whether they like each other, and whether they want to be with each other, right? I think that's a healthy version of dating. A sort of lower level description of dating you wouldn't tell us to your 12-year-old is people trying to find an excuse to escape into each other. But I think, if you're telling a kid this and you want to, of course, prime him for the ideal, you're dating somebody to assess whether this is somebody who, makes you happy enough that you want to spend time with romantically, and that maybe end up being with, right? That's how I would frame it. It really is a discovery process. And that's why I think when people put too much pressure on dating, it's really silly. Because if you're doing dating correctly, you should be learning a lot, right? And that's conscious dating. The more conscious you are when you're dating, you're gonna understand archetypes of women quickly, and you're gonna move through things. You're gonna move through people quickly, and frankly, if it's not aligned with your values, you don't really have to sleep with people either to get this. I mean, I do think that sex is an inevitable part of dating, particularly today. But if you come into dating with a very, very conscious intention, you don't even have to have sex with people by any stretch of the imagination to really understand your compatibility with them, for them to teach you things, right? Just real quick, what do I think about dating apps? I think dating apps are good supplementary material. Definitely not anti-dating apps, but I do think that a lot of people, especially today, don't have any social skills, don't have any real ability to talk to the opposite sex, or even people in general for that matter. And so they go on dating apps as a crutch. And when they do that, they're not going to get any really good results, because when they jump in the dating apps on a crutch, as a crutch, then basically what happens is that you know, they're bringing all their crappy energy and crappy, like, people can sense it on dating apps who you actually are in real life. I did best on dating apps when I was dating in the real world. That's why I think it's really good as a supplementary material. Whenever I've heard of somebody completely rely on dating apps, it's like usually their results just start to tank and their satisfaction starts to tank. Craigslist, that's the OG. That's the OG method. That was a. I never did it myself, because you could get a lot of sketchy people on there. But that was the old way of doing it to meet people. What's a good plan to overcome the damage a guy has done to someone by cheating with men? I don't understand this. Can you rephrase that? Because I'm starting to think now that the guy slept with another guy, so I'm kind of confused. Why do 5'1" women want a 6 foot man? I don't know. I don't get that one. But I'll tell you, tall girls hate that shit. Tall girls hate that shit. They hate it. Personally, I've never been a big fan. I mean, I've dated shorter girls, but every girlfriend I had was between 5'7" and 5'9". Every single girlfriend I had. I'm 6'1". Every single girlfriend. Never been super attracted, like super attracted to girls who were not, kind of thin and within that range. It's just been my thing. All right, next question. I had a question about whether or not it's a red flag if you ask your girlfriend to look at her phone and she says, wait. Whether or not it's a red flag if you ask your girlfriend, I'm assuming this is if you ask your girlfriend to not look at her phone and she says no. Because if you ask your girlfriend to look at her phone and she says no, it's not a red flag, right? It's not a red flag. If she doesn't want to look at her phone, it's not a red flag. And how should you proceed from there? It's hard for me to distinguish between a red flag and a boundary. Okay, so look, it is a flag. I guess you could say it's a flag. I mean, obviously you don't want that to be a pattern. What's the context of when this is made? What were you asking her to do? Is this on a, are you out for dinner and she's looking at her phone and you say this and then she says no? I mean, she's disrespecting you if she says this, right? She's disrespecting you if she says this. Now, so it really depends on how early on into the dynamic it is. If you're dating and she does this, just get rid of her. Just get rid of her. I mean, that's an automatic no. Now, if you've been dating for a while, if she's your girlfriend and the dynamic shifted a bit and she's looking at her phone, then what's happened is different. It's more of a matter of your presence in the relationship, her respect for you. So it's less of like at that point a red flag with her. It's a red flag about the state of the relationship. Because now she's at the point where she doesn't give a fuck about what you're saying. She doesn't really care that she's disrespecting you publicly. So there's a lot of context to this. If you're dating, just first, second, third date with a girl, whatever, she does this shit, yeah, it's done. Absolutely, it's done. If you've been dating her for a couple of months and then one night she does it, then it's either an issue with her, as it's an issue with the respect in the relationship, and she may have a bad habit too. You may need to call that out, and if she can't handle that, then it's done, right? But you are enforcing a boundary, but you have to ask yourself, what are the reasons why she's doing it? All right. Next question. I'm going to get to the things that you guys are posted in the thread, but I got to get to the people who submitted questions beforehand. Okay. Dating relationship question. I'm a 23-year-old male. A girl and I have had fun in a flirtatious relationship over the years. It's relaxed. We see each other about once a month, probably even less, with occasional sex. The problem is that the relationship is entirely built on negs, in fact, dependent on them. When the negs stop and we start to be nice or normal to each other, I can feel the tension polarity weaken. What's more, when I briefly attempt put aside the negs and warm up to her, she accuses me of lying by citing a recent neg I made, or just negging me for making a warm comment at all. It's as if she is incapable of taking my compliments seriously, even when I say them in a serious manner. The relationship is fine, but what is going on here? Can I reduce the dependency on negs without sacrificing tension and polarity? Okay, so the only question I have here is this actually a relationship, or is this just a girl that you occasionally go and fuck? That's an important distinction. He says it's a relationship, but he says they see each other once a month or less, and there's occasional sex. So it sounds like it's more of a fuck buddy dynamic than it is a relationship. If it's a relationship, it's a pretty unhealthy relationship. If it's a fuck buddy dynamic, this is pretty common for that age demographic. Kind of fits the bill for college and, maybe slightly after college. The reason this is happening is, I mean, she's a low self-esteem girl, right? Because she wants to be hit with these things because that creates tension for her. I remember this with girls I dated in college. I mean, a lot of girls at that age have levels of low self-esteem, or a better way to put it also is that they don't know who they are. And so a way for them to be able to interact with other people is to, everything's kind of like the sarcasm. And that's become especially prevalent with the newer generation, but even with us millennials, it's just a very common thing to use sort of, making fun of the other person as a defense mechanism and a way to kind of get close without getting close. So she pushes you away when you say these things because she is not able to receive a compliment, because a compliment does not fit with her self-image, right? Now, there's two pieces here. Now, some people will say, well, if you keep negging her, you keep fucking her, then why don't you keep doing that? Well, eventually this is going to end. It's eventually going to end. I mean, yeah, you can prolong it, but you're staying in a lower consciousness level. And so I give you credit for trying to shift this. I do want to point out some things, though. First off, you have to be very careful. So if you're doing this, I really hope that you are able to let it go if it doesn't work out, because the reality is that you can heal a girl, you can help a girl to get past a bad pattern, and she can still bite you, right? She can still be a snake, she can still bite you. The whole famous thing with like the scorpion on the turtle or whatever the fuck animal that was taking it across the river. She does not believe good things about herself, okay? And so if you tell her good things about herself, it could very well decrease the polarity and things could end. There's just no doubt about this. And so I would do this in a very, very, I wouldn't just say these nice things and then when she responds like that, I would actually call her out. I mean, if you can't stay in this dynamic, because the way that it's like default is that you're both mean to each other and that creates tension. So you kind of have this sort of like, okay, we're connected to each other, we like each other, but we won't admit it. And because we won't admit it, that's where the tension comes from. And then when you start to admit it, she's like, oh, wait, he's weak. I don't feel good about myself. So if he's saying this, he must be a loser. So now I'm going to move away. Whereas if you go above it and you say, hey, what the fuck is wrong with you that you can't take a compliment? We've been fucking for a couple months now. And, whenever I say something nice to you, you just totally like shut down and you push me away. And I don't really like that. I don't want to be with someone like that. And then what you do is you break this pattern and you're willing to leave. You break the pattern, and then it's in a situation where now maybe she starts to open up. You're not out of the woods yet, because don't for a second believe that this girl is healed as a result of that conversation. And in all probability, she'll probably cheat on you at some point. I'm just being honest. She probably will cheat on you at some point. She'll probably get drawn to another guy. Things will get fucked up. But you will have at that point made a permanent impact on her, and she will have very, very strong feelings for you. When I say that she might cheat on you or whatever down the line, it's more because she's not prepared to accept this new image of herself, so she has to push you away in some way. That's how it works. So a little more complicated than you maybe thought you were getting into with this. So yeah, but the basic thing is call it out, but be prepared for it not to work. Definitely do not, but when you say that kind of stuff to a girl, I mean, man, they just, it's amazing. It's amazing what happens. They fall deep. All right, let me just keep. I'm gonna roll through the comments real quick. During COVID, how else do people meet people without a dating app? Everyone has a mask on. It's much harder. I mean, if you have a healthy social circle, then that's good. The other thing, of course, is that if you people are still doing cold approaches in the big cities, and you're dealing with a lot of neuroticism now. I mean, it's really frustrating. They're making it so difficult for people to connect with each other. That's kind of the intention. Um, but you can still do it. You can still do it if you have healthy social circles. You can still do cold approach and meet girls that way. But I of course would not be lying and saying this is the easiest time in the world to meet people. It's not. It's not. I mean, most of us haven't seen. We have between just the general polarization and the fear around everything. I mean, most of us have not seen huge numbers of our circles this past year. We may have kept very much in touch with one part of our circle, but we haven't seen the others. And of course, that reduces the chances of you meeting people organically. But there are people out there who are not interested in the bullshit. So, okay. Has anyone else noticed the deluge of women entering the manosphere on Twitter, etc.? Yeah, especially in this comment field, which is all good. It's all good. I got no issue with that. I just want to make a point about it, though. I just want to emphasize, by the way, guys, little intermission. These wines are really great. Really, like the best Valpolicellos I've had during the series. No doubt about that. Like really superior stuff. So I know some of you guys like to take the snapshots. Highly recommend you try the brands. I'm super excited about them. Okay. Let me see. What's the time here? Got 20 minutes. All right. Yeah, there's a lot of women coming in. The reality is because women go where the energy is. All right. Women go where the energy is. Women go where things are shifting. And any new space, any new creative space is generally begins with a bunch of men who are like, we don't like this stuff, whatever it is. Could be industry specific, but they have a bunch of ideas and they want to share it with each other. They want to grapple with each other, and the energy of progress moves to this sort of corner. This is the way it has gone throughout history. And so you have this as a section for a while, whereas women tend to maintain with the stability of the mainstream. But as the mainstream begins to lose its legitimacy, well, first off, they're not finding guys that give any energy, because guys that maintain part of that degrading system don't actually give off anything appealing, less and less. It's kind of like some women will maybe grab onto those who have captured interest in the system, but no one's really liking it. No one's really enjoying it. And so you start to see then a massive movement of women away from that towards guys who have the new energy. And I want to just make a point here about sort of the 5D stuff versus 3D. I tweeted about this today. I think it's a relevant segue. What we believe, what we want, what we believe exists in the higher realms. Okay, you can call it sort of dream state, quantum field. And as we send our energy up there, we imagine we want this world, we want this world, we want things to be like this. Based on what happens down here, there's an interfacing between that. But that creates a pull. So everything starts to move towards the direction of the energy. And people call that, it's been called the zeitgeist, right? Carl Jung talked quite a bit about this. You can feel in a population when there's a desire for war. You can feel in a population when there's a desire for change, right? After 9/11, And part of this is a hijacking as well, right? It may not have occurred before, but to be fair, also the population hadn't had a war in a while, and they were very keyed into sort of energy that existed, and so they knew that there was right plucking there for men every generation or so. Um, young men want to fight, right? So you have to channel that energy one direction. You can hijack it, but that's a natural part of being a man wanting to fight. So you have this higher density thing that goes on, and it's trying to configure itself in the lower fields, trying to configure itself in the lower densities. And how it configures itself and when it configures itself depends on what sort of hijacking goes on. You can talk about this in regards to recent events, but it still exists there, and you can't change the zeitgeist. You can't change it. You can only try to hijack the energy of it. That's the only thing you can do on the lower levels. There's no way to block the energy of it, which is why if you have a more of an aware population, there's no way for you to basically stop it because they become immune to hijacking. And so when you have a population that has an energetic desire for something, yet they become aware of hijacking, then it becomes more and more difficult to hijack it, and eventually the inevitability occurs. Right? So anyway, that's a long way of saying that, yeah, women are drawn to this area because this area is an incubator for the energy of the new world. It's the way it is. And women don't want, smart women don't want to be in the old world. It's stale. It's so stale, guys. It's so boring, right? I think we can all agree it's like the most, it borders between repulsive and boring. There's like nothing about it at this point that's interesting. There's nothing about it that's inspiring. It's all gross and mind numbing. And, there's nothing radical about that position. Everybody feels it. Everybody feels it. I think you could find easily 80% of people feel that right now. So I think I'm going to save the rest of the stuff here because we have a good list. I'm going to try to do it real soon, though. I'm trying to get the rest of these questions. I could keep. Well, you know what? All right, let me just move through this real quickly. Let me move through it real quickly. A lot of interesting comments here about, about short guys. Let's not be mean. Yeah, Jimmy Kimmel. Yep. All right. You guys should be ashamed of yourself for being American. See, this is like, where do these people come from? I actually don't even understand. Where do these people come from? It's like, why would you be ashamed of yourself for being from anywhere? It's like, did you choose where you came from? It's ridiculous. Ridiculous stuff. All right. Let's try to go through these last questions. My dating history has been filled with women that distance themselves after we start getting close. For example, canceling a date last second with no explanation and not responding to texts. I make my intent clear with girls beforehand if I like them, and I give them space when they distance. Sometimes they come back, but they repeat this pattern. I understand our relationship with others is a reflection of our relationship with ourselves. I just realized I may not be projecting the self-assured aura on dates that can make women comfortable being vulnerable around me. On my last date, I held hands with a girl overlooking the city lights on the bay, and I still felt like I was sitting 6 feet away from her. I felt that if I were to move in for a kiss, she wouldn't reciprocate because she could feel I had a wall around my heart or something. This may be a broad question, but do you know of the kind of inner work that needs to get done past this? Really appreciate you, man. Thank you for doing good. Well, look, this is such a common kind of thing that guys have, but look, like, I do have things for inner work, but really, I mean, this is what a lot of the deep work coaching is for. We got to go back through your history. We got to find the points where this belief comes from. We got to bring it to light. And you might know it logically, but you have to feel it emotionally to really bring it to light. So it'll shift. So, I mean, it is a coaching pitch. I hope you fill out an application. I know people, you'll do it when you're ready. You'll do it when you're ready. But I want to just, offer that out there. But the reality is that you have, there's a rejection belief here. There's a belief of, that your needs don't matter. It's a belief that your needs don't matter around women. And where that comes from, well, there's a lot of different ways that could come from. I don't know your story, but definitely worth dealing with, because it's clearly, if you can get to these points with girls, you're not an attractive guy, but the beliefs will kill you with this stuff. All right. Hey, Pat, good to hear things are going better for you. I'd like to hear your take on long distance relationships. My girlfriend lives in Prague. I'm in Berlin. God, that's like an hour away. You Europeans with your long distance relationships. That's like 2 hours from Prague to Berlin. Okay, it's long distance, but it's like, let's be fair here. This is not too long. We try to see each other weekly, but COVID shutdowns are making it more difficult, and I feel as if she's starting to distance herself emotionally. Phone calls are terse. She's perpetually in a bad mood. When we're together, it's taking longer to get comfortable with each other. What do you think? Okay. All right. So, this is actually pretty critical stuff. She's pulling back. That's when a girl is, I'm not trying to create any kind of fear here. I'm just trying to emphasize the seriousness of the situation. When a girl's doing this stuff and it's becoming harder for her to want to meet up, and, she's starting to distance herself, she's already mentally leaving the relationship. That's just a fact. She's mentally leaving the relationship. Now, is it the distance? Sure. I know with the restrictions, it's a little bit bigger internally in Europe. So I guess it's fair to say that, I don't know what the border restrictions are at the moment between European countries across the board. I do know that there are border controls. There might be some PCR tests, which maybe is what you're talking about, for the difficulty because of COVID. But look, I would pull back. I would call it out, but I would pull back a bit. Pull back more. She's pulling out of the relationship, though. I gotta tell you, she's pulling out of the relationship. And so, the Machiavellian thing to do would be to kind of call it out actually to end the relationship. You could be like, hey, look, I don't really know what's going on here. Seem really distant. This isn't really becoming enjoyable to be with you. And by pulling back like that, because I'm getting the sense that you're probably leaning in more as she leans out, and you're aware of that, but you guys are still going on these phone calls rather than trying not to have the phone call at all because the phone call sucks. You still want to have these conversations with her, and she's going through the motions, but the resentment's building. So you could call her up and you could basically end things, and tell her why. It would be like not exactly breaking up, but it would be like, hey, I don't really know what's going on, but it doesn't really feel like we have the same sort of dynamic anymore, and I'm not really satisfied with this. And that would actually, perhaps preserve some attraction. The risk is if you at this point, I don't know how long you've been together. I don't know what the trust factor is. If you guys have been together for a while and you have a high trust factor, although you're long distance, so I don't think that's probably the case, you could call her out and be like, hey, what's going on here? What's going on? And you could approach it that direction if you wanted to. So you can do either way. You can do a little more Machiavellian. You can do a little more, sensitive, depending on the trust level. But the reality here is you have to accept that she is detaching from the relationship, and you got to nip it in the bud. You got to call it out. You got to be ready to jump. You got to mentally prepare yourself. Do not be blindsided by this. All right. Next question. I love everything you cover. If you have any tips or advice on what helped keep or gain back the relationship between you and your wife after your first baby, or like in general. My boyfriend and I are expecting our first baby in September. We've been together for 9 years, but I'm nervous of losing our relationship with each other, and it's becoming just parenting about the baby. Any and all advice, tips are welcome. Hope everything is great. Have a great day. Okay. Well, one of the things that I love about my job is that I have to constantly be trying to, as I grow, right? As I grow, as I enter into new stages of life, there are more and more things I learn and have to distill information and knowledge from. And so this whole thing about, once you have a baby, what are the tips for maintaining these things? This is all, this is all new stuff for me. It's all new stuff for me. So I'm going to tell you some of the things that I've been doing so far and trying to understand. But I'm also going to, caveat at that this is a new edge for me. So don't think of this as necessarily refined material yet. I am in a house at the moment. We go to New York every 10 days or so, right? For a couple of days. Probably what we're going to do going forward now. Yeah, we went to New York once since early December. Okay. First week in December was our last weekend apart from my parents while we did not have the baby. And since then, we've been to New York once for like a 4-day period. And I think that what we're going to do is go probably about every other weekend for about 5 days at a time. We had talked about going every weekend. It's a bit tiring to have to move everything, all the things you need for the baby back and forth. Not that we need a ton because she's breastfed and she's small, but okay. The point I'm trying to make here, though, is that still in the recovery period. Okay, if you understand what that means from sexual standpoint, not that we have been sexual, but if you understand that from the standpoint of, a lot of things have happened to that area of the body for a woman. So things need to get back into position. Everything needs to get, you know, so things do change. And I can tell you throughout the sexual relationship, I'll just be very honest. I know that there's probably journalists watching this stuff. They want to try to paint me as some kind of crazy person. But I'm just gonna be very, it's pretty basic stuff here. Anybody who's had a kid understands this. First trimester for us was fine. She had mild nausea at times, but pretty much fine. Sex life wasn't affected. Second trimester, sex life wasn't affected. First month of the third trimester was fine, but after that, it's to just say there's a lot of it's a bit there's not a lot of space down there. Let's put it that way. It's a little uncomfortable for everybody involved. Maybe your experience is different if you've gone through this, but we kind of had to go back to high school. I think kind of have to go back to the high school ways of sexuality more, because so things do change. Things definitely change. I am not complaining at all whatsoever about what's happened. I mean, relationships evolve, and having a child together evolves the relationship. And we are figuring out, especially given the fact that we're at my parents' house, you can't really have you don't have as much full openness as you would like in your own private abode. But the reality is with all these things is if you don't make time for it, it doesn't happen. If you don't prioritize it, it doesn't happen. Right? It doesn't happen. That's just the reality. So you have to make time. You have to prioritize your sexual relationship together. You have to prioritize time with each other. I don't think that the newborn is so bad compared to what happens down the line. I think, when you have kids that are more mobile, a newborn sleeps a lot. When you have kids that are more mobile, and sleep less, it's a little bit more of a difficult situation. It's more complicated. So I think that the biggest thing by far is the first off, he has to understand just the toll it takes on her and her body. Not that it's like traumatizing, but just it takes a toll. And, my wife is up during the night with the baby. When the baby fusses, she's up at night with the baby. Okay. I mean, these are all things that affect her feeling. And so, and if I just spend my entire day working or fucking around or whatever, you can't really do that anymore. So the guy has to be aware of the fact that time becomes more valuable. You have less leeway to fuck around. And what women want is, yeah, they want you to help with the baby, but they also want you to just be there with them. They want you to, they want to feel that you care about them, that you still want them. I don't think there's anything that is more attractive to my wife than me wanting to spend time around her. And I do want to spend time around her. But I have a busy mind. I'm doing lots of different stuff. And I'm always, I have a little bit of solipsism. I think about myself. So I have to remember to think about her and the fact that her world has become very small. Her world is the baby at this point. And she wants it to not just be the baby, she wants it to also be me. And so the more whenever I'm like, I want to spend time with my wife. Yeah, I'll help out with the kid, but I want to spend time with my wife. That's a huge emotional factor for her that pulls the relationship back to this sort of higher level, more desire. And I think if you have a place fully to yourself, and we do have that in New York, but when we spend, 2/3 of our time here, it's harder to do that stuff. So that's what I recommend. I'm going to save the rest of the questions for the next Periscope because we're at 6:30, and as you guys who have been long timers know. But let me just quickly go through these last questions here. Let's go through these last things. So yeah. Anyway, guys, I appreciate you. It's great seeing you again, and we'll tackle these last questions and the next stuff coming up in the Periscope within the next week. I think probably Monday or something like that. Take care. I'll see you.